everyone, welcome back to the deep dive. You know why you're here, right? To get to the good stuff fast.
That's right. Cut through the noise and figure out what really matters.
Exactly. And today we're diving deep into the latest and greatest open journal systems, OJS 3.5.
Big changes.
Huge. And we've got our hands on some pretty awesome material straight from the source, the Public Knowledge Project.
The folks behind OJS.
Yep, they've put together a detailed explanation of all the new bells and whistles. And we also dug into this super informative YouTube video. It features DEA Go, a UX UI designer at PKP.
Getting the inside scoop.
Oh yeah, straight from the design trenches. So our mission today, to break down the most important updates in OJS 3.5, we'll see how they're going to impact journals, for editors, reviewers, those folks.
And authors, too. Can't forget them.
Right, of course. We're talking about everything from, making the whole thing easier to use, improving data privacy, GDPR stuff, and just creating a smoother experience for everyone involved.
Streamlining that workflow.
Totally. So we'll be hitting all the major points. The redesigned submission dashboard, that's a big one. Then all those updates to the masthead and GDPR compliance, and author affiliations now integrating with ROR.
ROR, that's interesting.
Very. Plus, we'll cover enhancements to the peer review process and some really intriguing changes they've made to how languages work in the system.
Sounds like a packed agenda.
Oh, it is. But hey, that's what deep dives are for, right? Ready to get a clear picture of all that's new?
Absolutely. Let's jump in.
Okay, first things first. Let's talk about that first impression when you log into the system, the submission dashboard.
Right, the command center.
Exactly. Now, from what we've gathered, versions 3.3 and 3.4, their dashboards, they did the job, but
they could get a little, busy.
Busy is a good word. Our sources say usability tests revealed that a whopping 88% of people found it kind of overwhelming.
Makes sense when you think about it. You've got editors, reviewers, and authors all needing different things. And the old dashboard tried to show everything at once.
Information overload.
Exactly. So the big focus in 3.5. Simplify, 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 make it user-friendly, not just pile on more features.
So someone fires up 3.5, logs in. What's different visually from those older dashboards with their tabs and sometimes hidden information?
Well, right off the bat, you'll notice those old tabs at the top. My, queue, unassigned, active, archived, they're gone. Poof. And remember those little down arrows you had to click to see more details? Those are mostly a thing of the past. No more hide and seek with submission info. Incomplete submissions. They used to clutter up the main page. Publish stuff off in its own archive section. In 3.5, everything's about context.
Show me what I need when I need it.
Precisely. Your submission status, front and center, no clicking around. Plus, they've added these views. Basically, quick filters, sort by active submissions, those in peer review needing reviewers, keeps things organized.
I like that. And what's this I hear about an editorial activity section? Sounds handy.
Oh, it is. A real game changer for keeping track of where things stand. Each submission now has this dedicated area outlining the next steps. It links directly to reviewer info, their status, anonymity, deadlines, recommendations. You can even assign new reviewers right there.
All in one spot.
Exactly. And there are these clear indicators, like all recommendations are in, decision needed, helps you see the big picture at a glance.
Makes a ton of sense. I also noticed they went fully vertical with the navigation. What's the thinking there?
Moving to a purely vertical system. That's a fundamental shift in how intuitive OJS feels. That old mix of horizontal and vertical menus, it could be clunky and even caused accessibility issues for some users. This streamlines everything. Now, this isn't some spur-of-the-moment change. It's part of their long-term vision. Eventually, all menu items will be tucked into that single vertical structure. This is all based on years of feedback, by the way. PKP's been gathering data since 2019, tons of user interviews and research.
Really listening to the people who actually use the system.
Exactly.
What other dashboard changes stand out? I think I read something about easier deletion of incomplete submissions.
Oh, yeah, that was a pain point for sure. Those incomplete submissions used to just linger. Now, boom. Right by the filters, there's a little menu, delete them with a click. Small change, big impact on keeping things clean and uncluttered.
Love it. And these improvements aren't just for editors, right? What about our authors and reviewers?
They haven't been forgotten. Authors get a much clearer view of their active submissions, revisions, and overall manuscript status. Reviewers. They can easily see their assigned, completed, declined reviews. They can even respond to new requests right from their dashboard. It's all about a smoother, less overwhelming experience for everyone.
Sounds good. And accessing the submission workflow page, they've streamlined that too, haven't they? No more jumping to a whole new screen.
Nope. Now it pops open in a side panel. You can check things quickly without leaving the main dashboard. Way fewer clicks for common tasks. Oh, and remember that super annoying thing where your filters would disappear if you clicked on a submission and then went back? Gone. Filters stay put.
Hallelujah. Filter persistence, finally. And they've added a warning system to prevent accidental data loss, right?
Yep. If you're in the middle of a form and try to navigate away without saving, you'll get a little nudge. Hey, are you sure? It's simple, but it can save a ton of frustration.
Absolutely. And lastly, on the dashboard, viewing a published submission, what's different there?
Well, now it takes you straight to the publication tab. The title, abstract, and a clear published status. No more going through the production workflow. It's all about showing the most relevant info based on where that submission is in the process.
Makes sense. Okay, let's move on to another big topic, GDPR compliance and those masthead improvements. This seems like a pretty significant overhaul of how user and roles are handled in OJS 3.5, right?
It is. The old system, back in 3.4, it had its issues. Editors were stuck manually creating accounts, assigning roles, entering tons of user data.
A recipe for headaches?
And privacy concerns, too. Plus, imagine someone registered in one journal on the same OJS installation, trying to update their info for a role in a different journal. Nightmare. The whole thing was inefficient and frustrating.
So how does 3.5 fix this user and role management mess? This new invitation-based system, what's the scoop?
It's a complete rethinking of the process. Security, reduced workload for editors, streamlined role management, all while prioritizing user privacy and flexibility. The user and roles panel, it's got this invitation table right at the top showing any pending invitations. Below that, a table listing all the current users. Essential info is all right there. Usernames, emails, roles, start dates, affiliations.
So much clearer at a glance.
Right. They even ditched those tiny information icons for more straightforward 3-dot icons. Each one gives you specific actions for that user.
Nice. And the process for inviting a new user to a role, that's totally different now, right? What about that invite user to a role button? What happens there?
That's the heart of the new system. Click that button and you can search for an existing user by name or email. See if they already have an account or a role in the journal. The invitation form itself, much improved. Enter the user's names, which they can edit later, pick their role, set start and end dates, even decide if the role should be visible on the masthead. And here's the best part. The system automatically generates an email invitation based on a template you can edit.
So no more writing those out by hand?
Nope, much easier. And what if you make a mistake or need to change something in the invitation after you sent it? It happens.
All the time.
Well, now you can edit or even cancel sent invitations. Change the role, tweak the visibility, even add a new role. The old invitation is automatically canceled and no one goes out. No confusion for the recipient. Plus, you can add or remove roles for existing users directly. One key change, though, for GDPR. Editors can no longer directly edit users' personal information.
So if an editor can't edit that info, how does the user provide it?
Yeah.
This is where that invitation tool set comes in, right?
Exactly. User clicks the link in the email. It takes them to a dedicated tool set. They can verify their ORCID, create a username and password if they're new, agree to the privacy notice, and then input all their details. Name, affiliation, country. They see their assigned roles and can accept or reject the invitation. And once they've accepted and created their profile, they can update that info whenever they like.
Much more secure, user-friendly way to handle all that. Now, the editorial masthead itself, that's been revamped too, right?
It has. You can still get to it through Archive's editorial masthead, but there's a new dedicated editorial history page. It lists all former editorial team members, assuming they agree to be included with their name, affiliation, start and end dates, even their ORCID ID if they've provided it. Reviewers aren't included, at least not yet. You can access this history page right from the main masthead. And the old editorial team area, it's been renamed Editorial History. Now, journal managers can manually enter records of past editorial contributions.
Creates a much richer history of the journal and recognizes all those contributions. Let's move on to author affiliations and the ROR integration. This sounds like it could make author profiles way more accurate and flexible.
For sure. A big new feature is adding multiple affiliations to your profile. This is thanks to some awesome collaboration with GOTSI at Tybee. Contributors, specifically authors for now, can link their profiles to institutions in ROR, the Registry of Open Access Repositories. And even if their institution isn't in ROR, they can still add it manually. This gives you a much more detailed picture of an author's academic connections.
So walk me through it. How does an author actually add these affiliations? Is it easy to do during submission?
Totally. When you're making a new submission, or if an editor's editing contributor info, there's a table for affiliations. As the author starts typing their institution, the system auto-suggests places from ROR, and there's a link to double-check against the ROR database. To actually register that institution, they click an ADD button. If it's not in ROR, they just type the name and add it manually. Simple.
So how do you tell the difference between a ROR-affiliated institution and one that's not?
Easy. ROR institutions have a little ROR logo next to them and a clickable ROR ID. Non-ROR institutions won't have that. Oh, and institutions can be entered in multiple languages.
That's fantastic, especially for journals that publish research from all over. Okay, let's talk peer review, the heart of scholarly publishing. What's new and noteworthy for reviewers and editors in OJS 3.5?
Several great improvements. First off, editors can now send review reminders before the due date. In the past, it was only after the deadline. Now you can configure automatic reminders 2 or 5 days beforehand for both initial requests and those nearing the deadline. You set this up in Submissions, Dashboard Settings, Workflow Review.
So much better for staying on schedule. What about those reviewer recommendations after they've assessed a manuscript? Anything new there?
Yep. Editors can now customize the set of recommendations reviewers can choose from. The default options might not fit every journal perfectly. Now you can edit or disable existing ones, even add new ones that are more relevant to your journal. You can't change recommendations that have already been used in completed reviews, though.
Got to keep those historical records accurate. I also noticed that authors can suggest reviewers during submission. How does that work?
It's a feature lots of editors have been asking for. Authors can now suggest potential reviewers, though the journal manager can enable or disable this. If it's enabled, authors provide the name, email, affiliation, and a brief reason why they're suggesting this person. Editors can see these suggestions right in the submission workflow.
Could be a good way to tap into author networks and find relevant expertise while editors still control the process. What about the review reports themselves? Can editors do more with them?
They can. Editors can now download completed review forms as PDFs or XML files. And there are different versions. An author-friendly version that only includes sections the author is supposed to see, and a full version for the editor with everything.
Helpful for archiving and maybe analyzing the review process. Another reviewer-focused enhancement is seeing recommendations from previous rounds. Why is that useful?
Especially for resubmissions. When reviewers are invited to look at a revised manuscript, they can now easily see their own report from the previous round. This helps them remember their previous feedback and see if the authors have addressed it properly. There's a Read Review Round 1 box right in their assignment.
Excellent for consistency across multiple rounds. Lastly, for peer review, it seems editors can now handle cases where reviewers communicate their decision outside of OJS.
Right. Sometimes a reviewer might email their decision instead of using the system. Now, editors can manually record that response, whether they accepted or declined right in OJS. You just use the menu next to the reviewer's name when a formal confirmation is missing. Keeps the system accurate, even with off-platform communication.
Lots of great improvements there, really focusing on making things better for everyone involved in peer review. Now let's touch on some other changes in OJS 3.5. This new settings access control, why was that added?
Well, in previous versions, like 3.4, journal managers and editors often had access to the same settings. That worked for some, but not always ideal. Sometimes you need clearer roles or more control over who can make changes. Some journal managers worried about accidental changes too. Plus, some editors never even used the settings area, so it just cluttered things up.
So how does 3.5 solve this? What does this permit changes to the settings option do?
It gives journal managers fine-grained control. They decide which roles, like journal editors or production editors, can actually access and change settings. By default, all journal manager level roles still have full access. But if you want to restrict access for certain roles, just uncheck that permit changes option. Those users can still access other areas like submissions, issues, DOIs, but not settings.
Much more control over administration. Many journal managers will appreciate that. Now, this is a bit more technical, but what about the new dedicated JITs tab?
JATS XML. That stands for Journal Article Tag Suite XML. It's becoming a huge standard in scholarly publishing. Basically, it's a structured way to encode research articles. Makes them easier to find, preserve, and use with other systems. Older OJS versions didn't have a specific place for these JATS files. This new tab, found in the Publication section, is a central storage area specifically for finished JATS files. Tools and workflows that use JATS can find the right file, and third-party XML producers have a place to upload and store them. Anyone with access to the Publication tab can usually access this JATS tab, and you can enable or disable it in the settings.
Streamlines things for journals using JATS XML. Now, onto those language functionality updates. It seems like they've completely rethought how languages are handled.
Big time. Especially important for multilingual journals, or those with a diverse user base. Before, the website language what the interface uses, and the submission language for metadata and content were sort of linked. In 3.5, they're separate. Website language controls the whole user interface. Submission languages, which cover things like titles, abstracts, and the language of the article itself, are managed separately using the ISO 639-1 list.
ISO 639-1 list.
Think of it as a global standard for language codes. It makes sure everyone's using the same abbreviations, helps systems understand different languages. This means journals can support tons of submission languages without activating them all for the user interface.
Much more flexible. What happens if a journal stops using a particular submission language?
Even if a language isn't active for new submissions, any metadata in that language can still be edited. Editors see and note that the language isn't active, though. They've also added a feature to change a submissions language after it's created. There's a change button on the Publication tab. But you have to provide all the metadata in the new language.
Got it. And they're working on something really interesting, simultaneous display of multilingual metadata, right?
It's in the prototype stage, but very exciting. The current system usually shows metadata in your chosen interface language, or the journal's primary language. This prototype wants to display it in multiple languages at once, like titles and abstracts. Imagine buttons or indicators showing which languages are available, letting you switch between them. Could really boost the visibility of multilingual research.
Fantastic. Breaking down those language barriers. Last but not least, they've added a way to track editor workload, haven't they?
Yes. When assigning participants to a submission, there's now an assignments button. It shows how many tasks that editor has across the journal. Helps make decisions about who's got bandwidth. This was a contribution from Ubiquity.
Really helpful for managing those editorial teams. So, looking at OJS 3.5 as a whole, it's a big update, tons of great stuff. What are the key takeaways for our listeners? What should they be thinking about?
The big themes are definitely improved usability, streamlined workflows, better GDPR compliance, a more supportive experience for reviewers, and greater flexibility for multilingual journals. And these changes are all driven by user feedback. PKP is really listening. The goal: make OJS less complex and more efficient for everyone.
Absolutely. These updates could really change how journals are managed and how research is published. So, here's a thought to ponder. With all these improvements focused on user experience and core functionality, how might OJS 3.5 impact the adoption of open access publishing? Will it make it easier for more journals to go open access? Maybe take a look at the full release notes from PKP, and when Release Candidate 2 comes out, give it a spin in a test environment. See these changes for yourself. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive.
Thanks for having me.
And until next time, keep diving deep.